Hi everyone, Martin here. I am here with Brian Cugelman, PhD, for our Spin Sucks AMA on Trust Bling, Tech Cred, and Online Influence. Brian is a digital researcher and marketer, and his PhD is in psychology, and he specializes in online research and combining big data with behavioral science to understand why we do what we do online. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
I have to start by asking you, go to the title of the session, Trust Bling, Tech Cred, and Online Influence, and ask you, what do you mean by Trust Bling?
Okay, yeah, so Trust Bling are those sparkly graphic design elements that grab your attention and that can foster trust pretty quickly. And research on how different psychological strategies can impact on people's emotions, attitudes, and behaviors shows that trust forms very fast, and it can also form from visual signals. So it's not the type of trust that you form through having a long-term relationship, but things that come very quickly where you make a rash credibility judgment and you say, okay, that's trustable. And it goes in a flash.
So what's an example or a few examples of Trust Bling that we would see on websites?
Yeah, so a lot of early e-commerce testing found that pictures of locks help to get more people to go through e-commerce processes, to put in their credit cards and do things. Even there was one famous early study on why phishing worked. And they found that even people in the tech industry fell for phishing scams because there were graphic design images of locks on pages.
So that's PHISHING, phishing.
Yeah.
Rather than what we might do in the summer.
Yes. So for scams, they would work because they're pictures of locks, even without the HTTPS certificate. Because most people in the early days didn't understand what HTTPS was. So the picture alone, and that was an example, certificates, all sorts of like visual things that make someone sort of feel that instant confidence.
So check marks, all of those. That's interesting. And so, yeah, we see them and suddenly we trust them. Well, what about the idea of tech cred or tech credibility? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's where we talk about the credibility of a product. So it's like, we have a mobile phone. Why would I feel I can trust the information that comes out of this? Or if I'm using an app, why would I trust, the information? Or, if it's telling me anything like towards a goal, or it's giving me recommendations on how to lose weight or anything, why should I trust it? So it'll come down to the credibility that the brand has. And so the technology credibility is synonymous with brand credibility or company credibility or the credibility of the people who are behind it. But we humans mess things up a little bit and will attribute human-like attributes to inanimate things. And so this is where we believe that any piece of software or hardware is reliable. It's going to come through on things we can believe what it has to say and put forward.
Oh, okay. How would a website, say, demonstrate that?
So websites typically would do it through the brand for starters. So if you have a credible brand, it's easy to have a credible website. So what do I mean by a credible brand? I mean, people, they'll generally know you. They'll believe that you have experts, you know what you're talking about. And so I could just step into a little bit of the psychology, but generally that will come down to they believe that you're honest and that you have competence or expertise. And then how do you manifest that? So that will normally manifest through demonstrations on the website. So you might have things showing the type of work you do, showing your products so people can see that they're real, they're literal, having physical address on it so people see it's an actual business. Client testimonials are typically used, and a lot of third-party data. So actually even a lot of people won't even judge. So there's a lot of credibility you cannot establish yourself because it happens in social media. And if people go out and they can't find information when they're trying to make those trust and credibility judgments, then they might disregard you right off the bat. So it doesn't matter what you do, but you do as much as possible. And those other things, though, they can cause damage,
right,
and they can impact it.
Or help you.
Yes, and they can shoot it through the roof as well. Okay. Even actually, they can do better than your own attempts at establishing credibility.
Why is that?
is we're very highly influenced by social factors. So social factors on people's opinions are massive. In my doctorate, when I started, I didn't really realize how strong social factors were in influencing what people did, how they thought. I'm a rebel. I do what I think is right, and I don't pay as much attention to people. And I guess, you know, we take our own biases to anything we do in behavior change or nudging. And so I didn't think it was important, and it turned out to always be one of the top factors in behavior change. So. And we're just susceptible to social influence. Part of it goes into evolutionary psychology, but things like social norms, so knowing what other people are doing, not wanting to let people down, risking a loss of status if we don't comply with something, following like authority figures. We do all sorts of crazy things that don't make sense because of social influence. And so you can have websites that look like a disaster, but if enough people tell you, hey, this is where you go, especially authority figures, community, you'll go to those horrible, crappy sites that don't look trustworthy based on recommendations.
It's interesting. What about authenticity when it comes to imagery on a website or on a blog?
Yeah, that's a very key for like relationship building and forming that connection with the source of the message or the brand. So, there's a lot of research that shows people tune out stock imagery and decorative images. They're decorative, right? And I think the brain sort of figures out there's no value in that because it's not what we're talking about on this page, or it's not the substance. And so the authentic images of real humans get focused on a lot more. And then also part of that goes into like brand voice and how you communicate. So if you can connect with people in a very straightforward, honest way, that's a very good way of starting to build a relationship. And a very real brand voice will feel authentic, you know? It's like, how do you get to a charming, real brand voice, right? Without, like, if you write for the government, you have no option to do this because you have to write for all people and be very safe. But if you have a very niche audience, you can get even more authentic. And if the people in charge of the company or who are working the front line can express themselves, you can really connect up with people.
Right, and that helps. I want to talk about the difference between digital design on desktop and mobile and how that might affect trust.
Okay, so one thing when you go to mobile rather than to desktop is it forces you to prioritize things. So a mobile, I just can't cram as much information in. So you can have more information on a website, less on here. And so people tend to use the space. So they cram it in. So a lot of web pages, they get structured with a ton of content. And it's because people can bounce around and move over the place. Whereas this forces you to do things. And also because most web pages are going to be based on scrolling rather than chopping things into multiple pages. You also have to think through the natural order and logic of things and how you present things to make them intuitive. So before credibility and trust are factors, just the different platforms force you to triage and to make things more accessible. And so more people will engage with you instantly because of accessibility. So there's a better chance they can connect. In either case, if people had low trust or feelings or low credibility judgments on the onset, those could be deal breakers, and they might disengage instantly either way. So on entry, the trust and credibility is not a factor. And down the line, the trust and credibility will be a factor again if they decide to go with things. So by having a more accessible content, more people are going to be able to connect with you and get to the point where the trust can form. So I'm a huge fan of mobile first because it forces you to do a ruthless content triage and prioritizing. And then we did our first massive mobile first transformation on our own products just recently, like a complete, and engagement has never been higher.
Okay, that's great advice to go mobile first. Well, thank you, Brian. This has been really great. For any of our readers, you can connect to Brian on Twitter at Cugelman. You can find Brian on LinkedIn, and your site is?
Alterspark.com.
And there's information on your training and lot of your writing there too, which is really interesting. Thanks very much, Brian.
My pleasure. Thank you, Martin.